Time for our man to man segment. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right on into man to man. So, as we jump into our man to man segment, all this month, all right, all this month during man to man, we're talking about the impact or the legacy of a man, right? We're talking about the impact or the legacy of a man. And I shared with you all on last week that the impact or the legacy of a man does not always have to be, oh, he left a big inheritance for me, right? My dad, oh, yeah, he left me a whole lot of money and this, that, and the other, and I inherited a company. No, but what you can inherit from a man, right? His impact, his legacy is just simply one that he was there, all right, one that he was a phenomenal man, right? Or is the impact or the legacy that you're leaving behind, he was never around, he never was there, he never showed up, he didn't care. Listen, let me just say, there are men who I've met and who I've had an opportunity to get to know for a few years who have left like just a large, huge impact on me. Case in point, I'm reminded of my father-in-law, Mr. Anthony Ely, especially around this time of year. Right, uh, I received um, I received a great lesson from him, and that is how to smoke a turkey. I didn't know nothing about smoking meats before I met Mr. Anthony, right? But Mr. Anthony took his time. He kind of explained it to me. He told me about his process, how he goes. And I used to taste that, and I'd be like, "Boy, man, that's really something. Like, I want to do that. I want to know how to do that." And it's because of him, right? His impact, his legacy, that now I know how to smoke a turkey. Now, I'm sharing the joy, the love of smoked turkey with folks. I had y'all remember I talk about my little man Timothy every now and then, right? My buddy Timothy, and so I had Timothy and his mom and sister with me one year, and they were like, "Oh no, we don't eat turkey," but they tried my turkey, right? They tried my turkey, and they were like, "Oh, I like this." And they're like, yeah, we can we get some more? Can we get another? Can we get some turkey this year? It's about impact. It's about legacy. What are you leaving behind on this earth? And it's not always monetary. Now, as we switch gears, we're gonna still talk about the impact of the legacy, but let's switch it now, right? And let's talk about what spiritual impact, what spiritual legacy are you leaving for the next generation as a man, and women. I know y'all are listening. Y'all can take in on this, and you can reflect this or relate this for yourself. But since this is man to man, I'm particularly just gonna shout out my fellas. Fellas, what is it? What type of impact are you leaving for the next generation spiritually? When the next generation, your children, your great grands, whomever, when they speak of you after you're no longer here, what will they say about you? Will they say, "Oh yeah, I never saw my grandfather or my father go to church," or will they say, "Oh, I didn't know he could pray. I didn't know he knew the Lord." You know, oh man, my grandfather, he was mean and evil, and oh, he was always cussing and this, that, and the other. My dad, man, I'm telling you, ooh, if you saw him like with a rattlesnake, you watch out for him more than you watch the rattlesnake, cause ooh, like what kind of impact, what kind of legacy are you leaving? I share this all the time, and somebody said, "Well, why do you always talk about your grandfather so much?" Because he left such an impact on my life. He left such a strong, heavy legacy. That's who I always wanted to be like, right? I mean, I'm telling you, I wanted to be like him so much that growing up, I wanted to change my last name from Chavis to Nash because I was like, man, that man right there, I want to carry on his legacy. I want to carry on and it was not really any disrespect to my dad, right? It was just that's how I felt. That's how strongly I felt about my grandfather. I tell people all the time, although he was a tiny man, that was Superman to me. I mean, could swing a hammer with the power and efficiency of Thor. You know what I mean? Was a small, tiny, petite little man, but was just, I mean, you couldn't outwork him. You couldn't, there was none of that. But one of the greatest legacies that I never forget, and that's why I quote what he says, what he used to say all the time. He left a legacy. He left an impact of faith. One thing I knew, my grandfather was a praying man. He may not have been able to read, right, very well, or much at all. He could read a little bit, but not a whole lot. Right? He could read enough to know what that the sign said stop, and he knew to stop at it. Right? Yeah, But anyhow, let's continue on. Let me continue on. He left a legacy of faith. He left a legacy, an impact that as for me and my house, we're gonna serve the Lord. One thing I knew, my grandfather was gonna be in that church on Sunday. If he was able to be, he would be there. When they needed deacons we need some deacons for devotion. My grandfather will be there. Well, what you want to do, Deacon Nash? I pray, I pray. You know, and I already knew my grandfather would get down there and he would talk to his father. He would talk to God. And I never forget. I never forget. My grandfather was a praying man. I remember I walked in on him one night, right? I walked in on him one night, uh, and he and my grandmother, I think, were getting ready for bed. I think I may have been going in there for something. I walked in on him one night, and what was he doing? He was praying. It stuck with me. I was like, man, he's praying. Even at and I'm gonna just say it this way, his old age, he still recognized he needed the Lord. And he prayed before he ate every meal. When we got together as a family, he would pray. And if he didn't pray, he would say, James, I want you to pray. Or, he would always say, I'm blessed to have, several ministers in my family. I've got my son, June, he's a minister. I got my son, Lawrence, and, all my children know the Lord. That's what he would always say. All my children know the Lord. I'm just blessed. I'm grateful. And then I got my grandson, who's a little preacher, and all that. And he would say, he'd tell one of us preachers to pray. I love that. I learned from my grandfather. See, some of the things that the impact that we get, some of the legacy that they leave is not always monetary. But I also learned from my grandfather the respect of position, no matter what the age is. My grandfather respected me as a minister, as a preacher, even though I was young and he was much older than me. He still respected me as a minister and a preacher, right? It starts. See, here's the thing. I think that we have kind of gotten away or forgotten that a lot of these values and principles and things, it starts with one person, the man. If a family, and I'm not saying a woman can't do it, but I've come to understand because I encounter so many children who have learned great values from their mothers, because their daddy is not around. So I'm not discounting what you do as women, ladies, yeah, as mothers. Y'all teach values, but there have been so many little boys who I've encountered, right? And when I come around, I'll be like, hey, I see something, I observe something, I pull them to the side, I say, hey, no, we don't do that, and this was why I explained to them, this is why we don't do that like that, you know what I mean? Because see, and then I just tell them. But there are certain things, and I've had a talk with my with Timothy's mom about there's certain things, and she told me this, which I already knew. There's certain things that as a man I can drive home for him that she's not fully able to as a woman. And so it starts, men, we have to be that example. We have to leave that impact. We have to leave that legacy. And it's not about money. It's not always about, an inheritance being something tangible. The greatest inheritance that my grandfather left me is not the fact that, or is not any kind of money. It's not the fact that there's a house here in Lake Charles that I can go back and look at and say, my grandfather built that with his own hands, with the sweat of his brow, from top to bottom. My grandfather built that, right? It's not that. The greatest impact, like, even if the house was no longer standing, the greatest impact and legacy is right here within me. It's the values that I learned from him of prayer, trusting and believing in God, that value of faith. I tell y'all all the time, my grandfather had a saying that I hold true and hold dear to this day because I found it to be the living truth. And that is, if you can trust God for one thing, then just trust him in all things. And that's what I've learned to do. That's why I don't stress, I don't worry, I don't trip about anything. Because I recognize and I realize, hey, God's got this. God's got me. So why do I need to worry? Why am I tripping? Why am I falling out? God gave me the breath. He gave me food. So I don't worry. Those people, they say, man, how are you? Why are you so easygoing? I learned a long time ago from my grandfather. If I can trust God for one thing, then I can trust him in all things. See, that's the impact. That's the legacy, and then I'm gonna just close it out with this. The other side of it is, I told y'all my grandfather was a worker, right? He was a hard worker. My love for cutting grass, seeing those lines in the grass, you know, having a nicely edged and manicured yard. I got that from my grandfather. I used to, spend summers out here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. My grandfather would go out there with that push mower, it had a little, what they call that, where, it was self-propelled. That's what it was. He had a little self-propelled, but he'd still be walking right behind that thing and would just, cut it, had them lined straight. Then afterwards, we'd sit out, me, him, and my grandmother. I remember one year while we were out cutting grass and doing stuff, my grandmother was in the house. She had one of those old school ice cream makers. She made us some ice cream, right? The little salt ice cream, however, y'all know how it used to be done. I think y'all know. I don't know what she did or how she did. I just remember she pulled a little bag out the little bucket, you know, and we had some good ice cream. And we sat there and we looked at that yard and we looked at God's great creation. And I was like, man, I helped with that. I picked up the pine cones and raked up the little straw leaves, that fell from the pine tree, the little pine straws. You know, it's about legacy. It's about impact. And that's that, fellas, we've got to think about, what type of legacy or impact do you want to leave? And I shared with you on last week, and I'm going to close with this again. It doesn't always have to be with your blood biological child, because there are some children in this earth that I'm trying to leave an impact for that did not come from my loins, but they crossed my path. And so I've got to give my very best to make sure that they understand and that they know this is what a man does. This is what a man looks like. This is how a man carries himself. All right. I'm gonna pick up next week. We've got another week of Man to Man, and I'm gonna pick up next week, and I want to talk about the impact of a man from the perspective of what it means to a little boy to be a man. And how your impact, how your current behavior helps to shape his future. I need you to hear that, men, and we're gonna deal with that next week. Your current behavior, how you handle yourself in the situations that you're in now, today, how that, right, affects his future, affects that young lady's future. Boy, I could go on and tell you about it, how a young woman seeing how a man treats other women shapes the type of men she goes after in her future, shapes the type of men that she falls in love with in her future. Boy, boy, we're gonna talk about it next week. Y'all in for it, as they say, on next week. I'm excited. Join me next week, right here on I Am Encouraged Radio for Man to Man. All right, all right, friends. It's about that time for me to go ahead and get out of here. I've got to make way for the Reverend Al Sharpton. He's gonna be coming your way with keeping it real. All right, with the Reverend Al Sharpton, and it's Exhale Friday. It's Exhale Friday on Keeping It Real with Reverend Al Sharpton, and you can reach him if you want to call in and exhale. You can reach him at 1-877 532 5797. Again, that number, 1-877 532 5797. All right. Now, I do want to real quickly make sure that I give you my birthday and anniversary shout outs. This week we did have some birthdays and some anniversaries. We had Miss DeBose. All right, she had a birthday on this week, and I'm sorry I had my sticky note with her name on it somewhere around here. However, I don't see it. But we celebrated Miss DeBose's birthday this week, and also this week, Brother Milton DeBose, I believe, is who her husband is. I do remember that. I'm just trying to remember her name. But Brother Milton DeBose and Sister DeBose celebrated 52 years of love and marriage. And so we celebrated their anniversary as well. We also had wife, wanted to send a birthday shout out to him. So we had those birthdays that we celebrated this week. Now, maybe as we go into our weekend, you're having your birthday. Maybe as we head into our weekend, or even today, you celebrate your birthday. And if you're celebrating your birthday today, I want you to know you're celebrating your birthday with the likes of President Joe Biden. He has his birthday on today. So, to everybody who's celebrating a birthday on today, here or this weekend, here is your birthday shout out.